Okay, fine, I watched this stupid-ass fucking first movie again. That was kind of mid, but Humpty was the greatest character ever conceived for cinema, so 10 out of 10. Anyway, Kitty in the first movie is fine. She's whatever. She's just there to be Puss's love interest, and oh no, she's sneaky. She double-crosses him, and wow, they're both very horny. Whoo boy. She has, no character in this first film, as well as no real relevance, since the story is entirely focused on the relationship between Puss and the stupid fucking egg. You can take her out of the movie with very minimal retooling, and not much would change. We get one interesting bit of backstory with her, that being how she was unexpectedly declawed by her previous owners. The movie then proceeds to do nothing with this information, even though it'd be the perfect catalyst for an arc where she doesn't trust anyone and has to learn to open up to others, and hey! That sounds like a certain actually good movie, doesn't it? Yeah, Kitty went from being bland and static in the first movie to one of the most dynamic and interesting characters in the sequel. Her bickering with Puss is consistently hilarious. It really does feel like they have a ton more history at this point, and they come across like an old married couple. But she also has a nice arc where she starts learning how to put her trust in others again. She starts off ready to shank Burrito at a moment's notice, but as I mentioned earlier, she eventually accepts that he genuinely is that nice. And she briefly mentions her declawing as one of the reasons she avoids trusting people in general. But a lot of the unresolved conflict with Puss specifically relates to something that happened in Santa Coloma. Mailman's here. Gotta pause. I should invite the mailman into this analysis. I should ask if he has anything to say about Puss in Boots. Oh, too late, he's going away. No. Okay, bye. After numerous references to this mysterious event, Puss finally reveals to Burrito that it was their wedding day. He left her at the altar, and she overhears how remorseful and guilty he feels about it. And so, she resolves his conscience by admitting to him that she didn't show up either, since Puss was incredibly ego-driven and too in love with himself. You might wonder why she so adamantly holds Santa Coloma against him, when she wasn't there anyway. And I feel like there are two possibilities here. One, she was lying. Maybe she did show up at the wedding only to get her heart broken, and pretending she wasn't there is her way of forgiving Puss. Or two, the one I personally prefer, is that she didn't show up, because her mistrust of Puss stems from his huge ego and lack of interest in other people. She's not actually mad about Puss not being at the wedding. That's just a symptom of the larger problem, which is how much Puss values himself over her. She doesn't want to be with such a self-obsessed guy in general. And when you combine Puss's selfishness with her general mistrust for the whole world that stems from her declawing, it's entirely understandable why she assumes Puss only has his own best interests in mind. And I really like how we don't actually know if Kitty went to the wedding or not. They never show a flashback of her there. It's like a Schrodinger's cat wedding. She was both there and wasn't there. Finally, we get to Puss himself, and unsurprisingly, I have the most to say about him among our central trio. First of all, can I just say that in the context of the larger Shrek universe, I was really worried about Puss's character for the past 20 years or so. In-universe, it felt like he was this famous hero / bounty hunter / ogre slayer for a while there. And then, as soon as Shrek picked him up by the collar, he lost all agency as a character for all time. It made sense in Shrek 2. He owed Shrek a life debt, and thus assisted him during his quest in this movie. But then, during the outstanding, phenomenal, undisputed champion of all cinema, I Need a Hero sequence, he says this. Okay, cool. Debt repaid, I guess. So why the fuck is he still dicking around with Shrek in the following movies? It never feels like he has a reason to accompany Shrek anywhere, outside of the producers saying, well, everyone likes Puss in Shrek 2, so we gotta keep him around in the other movies. But it never really made sense for his character to still be hanging out with Shrek. At least Donkey doesn't really have anything better to do. Aside from his wife, I guess. But the way that Shrek 4 concluded, it really just felt like Puss was already retired, and never really did anything cool again. So thank God this movie takes great strides to reinvent Puss, showing us that eventually, he did get back to heroism and being this legendary, almost mythical figure. It's a far cry from how thoroughly the Shrek sequels diluted his character. And look, I love Shrek 4 more than any other person on planet Earth. You could remove Puss from that story and nothing would change. You could also do the same thing with Shrek the Third, but to be fair, you could also remove that whole movie from existence and nothing would change. Anyway, back to the cool shit. The opening action sequence is how you reboot a character. having to pull off way more impressive feats than we've ever seen before. I especially love the way his sword swings are in time with the song, which, speaking of, Fearless Hero is a bop. But this opening sequence has a more important role than making Puss cool again. It makes him arrogant. He loves being a hero mainly for the recognition it gives him. He doesn't even remember what town he's in, he throws a huge party in his honor, and he's the one who awakens the sleeping giant by carelessly setting off fireworks. His arrogance really comes to a head once he slays the giants, but stays behind for an encore performance of his song. And this is what kills him. Would have been fine if it wasn't for his hubris, which we see in his past deaths montage. He wastes almost all of his previous lives in incredibly stupid ways, and even when the doctor advises him to stop and start taking his mortality seriously, he doesn't do that since his ego drives everything he does. It isn't until his literal encounter with death when he starts to reconsider. He goes to the cat home, and his dignity collapses. I guess one of the few problems I have with this movie is that it feels like we spend a while here, and you could have cut that time down. But it's still a necessary way to break the hero down and show him at his lowest point thus far. I mean, I guess technically his lowest point was being in Shrek the Third, but let's not worry about it. It's also a great idea to take away his sword for the majority of the movie. A crucial aspect of his heroism is now gone, and he's unable to reclaim it until he proves himself in the final showdown. And it's nice how, in addition to all these outside factors breaking down Puss's ego and humbling him, he also comes to his own realizations about himself. You can see in the Cave of Lost Souls scene how much he doesn't connect with his previous lives anymore, seeing them as arrogant jerks who value living up to the legend over forming bonds with others. A great showcase of his growth overall. The last element of Puss's character I want to touch on right now is a certain scene. Now, this is gonna blow your minds, but did you know that this movie has a realistic depiction of a panic attack? Again, much like the movie itself, no one really talks about this scene. But seriously, before it got memes to high heaven, try to remember that at one point, this was just a really mature and well-done scene. Puss has established his outward persona to be this fearless hero. Someone who never gets scared by anything, but the fear of death, both the concept and the character, has finally broken him. In the midst of this chaotic battle, with Jack Horner's bakers dying left and right in front of him, Puss sees the mysterious wolf yet again, and succumbs to the pressure of staying alive. So he runs off, eventually stopping at a tree to do nothing except hyperventilate. He can't communicate, he can't move, he can't think. He's just overtaken by fear and despair. It sticks out as one of the truest moments of the movie. It's here because it feels like a natural progression from the last scene and Puss's character, and it leads to Perrito fulfilling the desire he expressed earlier in the movie, to be a therapy dog. He lays his head on Puss's lap and just supports him, calming him down in the process and allowing him to finally open up about his fear. It's such a smart and natural payoff, and I like it even better because they don't mention the therapy dog thing. Perrito doesn't have a line like, "Wow, I guess I am a real therapy dog now," or, "Well, that just happened. Good thing you've got your therapy dog, Puss, my boy." No, they show rather than tell. They trust their audience to get it. They let a serious character moment play out without dumbing it down in any way or undercutting it with a joke. Obviously, there's a lot more to say about Puss's character and journey throughout this movie, but I'll save it for when we discuss a certain other character that Puss's arc is intertwined with. There's plenty of other peeps we should take a look at first. Like, why don't we see what a certain orphan girl and her bear family are up to? I feel like if there's any aspect of this movie that's just kinda good and not outstanding, it would be everything with Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Their presence is welcome and enhances the movie for sure. But I feel like there's some of the least talked about characters from it, for a reason. Not because they're bad. There's just so many other things to talk about here. They build them up as ominous bounty hunters that subverts everything you know about them from their fairy tale. Kinda like Jack and Jill in the first movie, except actually memorable and not as embarrassing. But, as it turns out, they're a bunch of incompetent goofballs masquerading as a crime family. Oh, and the bears can talk. It's genuinely funny how they wait a little bit to reveal that. In general, it's really fun to see a bunch of amateurs do their best at crimes. The only thing that can get kinda old is the number of just right jokes they make. Like, there's gotta be some other material they could have pulled from, because it really loses its charm after, like, the 12th time. But for the most part, they remain a fun, goofy antagonist team for Puss and Pals to contend with. It isn't until Goldie finally gets her hands on the map halfway through the movie that we start to see some of the depth that plays with these characters. See, throughout the first half, it's pretty unclear what horse this team has in the map race. We don't know what wish they're interested in making. Hell, the bears themselves don't even really know. They just trust Goldie's secret wish to be something spectacular. One that'll make them a big-time crime family with all the pies they could eat. But soon enough, the map tells her that what she seeks might be right in front of her. And oh, look at that! It's their captain back home. The bears quickly lose all motivation for getting the wish, since, after it turns out, they have all they want already. And Goldie sees an echo of her younger self. On the day she first wandered into the cabin, became a part of the bear's family. Usually in this fairy tale, Fox escapes and never crosses paths with these bears again. But it's pretty novel of the fairy tale subversion franchise to subvert what it usually does, and instead spin this story into a more positive and wholesome outcome. And said outcome is the found family trope. Ooh, I love it. It serves as a nice parallel to the found family forming between Puss, Kitty, and Burrito. And this scene in particular is where the movie finally tells you, yes, you're absolutely not wrong for finding Goldie and bears endearing. That was our intention. You're welcome. And Goldie is further smacked in the face with evidence that her adopted family is all she really needs. Courtesy of, who else? Burrito. They end up kidnapping him, and he has the time of his life watching Goldie and Baby Bear bicker, joining in with some colorful vocabulary. Grab it! He then expresses how much he would love a family like this, and that Goldie has truly won the orphan lottery. Yet another indication to Goldie that she has everything she wants already. And it, once again, doesn't quite sink in. Because in the next scene with these characters, she finally reveals that her wish is to have a proper family. Because apparently she's just too good for living with bears. It's a cruel motivation for her to have. And as hurt as the bears are, they nonetheless vow to get her that wish. It's nice to avoid the characters breaking up before getting together again in the climax cliche, even though this probably is a justifiable reason for the bears to temporarily leave. But Puss in Boots laughs in the face of played-out cliches, so instead, they accept that Goldie wants to move on. After all, she's not a bear. Hey, wait a minute. Just wish to be a bear. Problem solved. We can even have a spin-off of this spin-off. Sister Bear. The first film to make negative money at the box office, since Disney proved twice that audiences hate it when people turn into bears. So, armed with the knowledge that Sister Bear would utterly bomb, Goldie resolves to wish for human parents. But ultimately, she lets the wish go when she has it in order to save Baby, renouncing the wish since she realizes that the bears were her true family all along. It's a very simple arc and predictable conclusion for this side story, but I think it's nice to have it in here. I think I said in the previous Shrek analysis that I'm all for redeeming villains whenever it's appropriate, and that's very much the case here. Goldie and the Bears may have had the weakest storyline in the film for me, but the way it wraps up is just right. The Bears even got their unofficial wish of wanting a bunch of pies, since they get to take over a certain pie factory. And, as for everyone else officially vying for the wish, it's nice that they all realize that none of them actually needed it this whole time. Goldilocks already had the family she was looking for. Kitty already had someone she could trust in Puss. Puss already had enough with one life, and he just needed to value.
No stone
and there's one other character who should have accepted the abundance of magic he had, but just wasn't. He just needed more. He had the shallowest wish, and yet he's the only one who can give said wish up. Let's talk about... Back when the movie first came out, I was a bit worried that I was going to be the only Jack Horner enjoyer, since I didn't really see anyone else talking about him online. The discussion was all about the wolf, and Goldilocks, and Puss himself, and I figured I would just have to be Jack's main promoter, much like how I am with Crab Boy. But fortunately, the public reaction to this irredeemable monster was clearly a bit delayed. I guess people just needed time to process all this villainy goodness. But yeah, a few weeks later, everyone started talking about how much they enjoyed Jack Horner, to the point where he's probably the second most discussed character in the movie after Death. Which is funny, since there isn't a whole lot to analyze about him. He's just a fun, pure evil villain, with no emotional baggage or compelling backstory to make him relatable or understandable. Which is wild, since having a one-dimensional villain could be considered a knock against the movie. And yet, it's an aspect that's been universally praised here. Why do you suppose that is? Well, let's explore that, shall we? First of all, let's not forget what franchise this is. It's Shrek, the certified anti-Disney franchise. Ever since its conception, it has existed to push back against and subvert Disney and their signature brand of fairy tales. Traditional musical numbers get replaced with pop music. The beautiful princess becomes an ogre and stays that way. The characters swear and make innuendos and all that goofy stuff. It's a rejection of the ultra-family-friendly traditional values depicted in Disney's earliest and simplest fairy tales. And it worked wonders when it came out a few years after the Disney Renaissance concluded. But times have changed for the studio. Lately, they've made their princesses more proactive, their stories more layered, and, for better or worse, their villains more complex. Not only do many of them have motivations for the things they do now, but a lot of them hide their true intentions from the protagonists and the audience till the big reveal. This means that none of them really got the chance to be unabashed evil, since the evil versions of these characters barely get any screen time. All for the sake of serving a lame twist, yada yada yada. Come on, this is Shangri-La's 101. You should know this already. Between all the twist villains and movies with no villains in them, we haven't actually seen a real, honest-to-goodness main villain from beginning to end since King Candy in Wreck-It Ralph, and that was 11 years ago. Needless to say, everyone misses solely evil antagonists, and they kind of resent Disney for removing them from their stories. I swear to God, if they pull a fake out with Witch and Chris Pine turns out to be a twist hero, I am going to slide more. So with all that said, isn't it fitting that the Shrek franchise one-ups Disney yet again, giving us one of the most deliciously evil, irredeemable asshole villains any animated movie has had in years, and the anti-Disney element of his character goes a step further in being a reaction to the current climate of Disney films. You see, Jack is a hoarder of all sorts of magical objects from different familiar fairy tales. Just looking at his impressive trophy room collection, wouldn't you think he's the guy who has everything? But who cares? No big deal. He wants more. This gluttonous maniac will never be satisfied until he gets all of the magic in the world. Is this starting to seem pretty allegorical to something else? Jack Horner is Disney. He collects all these fairy tales and brings them underneath his umbrella, often misusing or misunderstanding them. Disney frequently changes the stories of certain fairy tales in order to make them more marketable. Like, I bet some of you didn't even know that the Little Mermaid dies in the original version of the story. And don't even get me started on the Snow Queen versus Frozen. It's totally fine to change stories around and make new adaptations out of them. But the thing is, Disney is so huge that their versions of certain fairy tales kind of overwrite the original in the public consciousness. But it doesn't really matter to them, does it? The Little Mermaid is a nice, happy story with no murder now. Aladdin has a genie doing celebrity impressions now. Chicken Little is a shitty alien invasion story now. A noble phoenix is a flamethrower now. Excalibur is a sword with a big rock stuck to it now. Hey, look at that! Jack Disney don't miss the point of Excalibur. And finally, you know, back when Shrek initially ended in 2010, Disney didn't have much. Just loving fans and stability, and a seemingly endless catalog of classic hit animated films, both from their own studio and from Pixar. Useless crap like that. But, over the course of the 2010s, Disney sure has been buying a lot of brands, huh? Between Marvel, Star Wars, The Simpsons, fucking Robots 2005 and all the other Blue Sky films, it's pretty clear that there's nothing Disney wants more than all of the IPs in the world. For them. No one else gets it. That's so bad.
Yes, the answer is yes.
Agree to disagree.
Jack Horner is easily the most aggressively anti-Disney villain in a franchise whose first villain was literally a caricature of former Disney CEO Michael Eisner. It's so nice that we're keeping this tradition alive, even after 21 years of this franchise existing. But of course, spiting Disney isn't the only reason Jack Horner is such an absolute banger villain. The dude is just consistently hilarious, often providing the film with some of its best one-liners, which are all delivered excellently in John Mulaney's trademark goofy voice. I also love his grotesque baby face and awful haircut. Just top-notch work. It should also be noted that Jack joins the pantheon of villains who are both silly and funny, yet also serve as a legitimate drastic threat. This type of villain is my favorite by far. Your Gaston, your Bill Cipher, your Kinnegaric 80s, Jack Horner easily secures a spot among their ranks, being consistently hilarious, but also someone who does some real damage and provides some stakes to the story. Like, without him, yes, Puss is still being chased by death, but the only other threat in terms of the Wish plotline is Goldie. Turns out, only wants her family back. Jack provides some crucial stakes to the story, while also being the catalyst for Goldie and the Bears, foregoing all pretense of antagonism and joining forces with Team Friendship. So he's funny, he's threatening, he's crucial to the stakes of the story. What am I missing? Oh yeah, a certain idiot. One of my favorite Jack jokes is undoubtedly that hilarious-ass Cricket. Not only is his chemistry with Jack great, and his voice and manner of speaking just perfect for comedy, moi, chef's kiss, but it's conceptually a great comedic idea to adapt Pinocchio's conscience, except this time task him with finding the good in a maniacal, irredeemable monster. And that's what I call a classic Shrekism. A fun subversion of a fairy tale we all know and love. Hell, the Cricket even gets an arc of his own, realizing that sometimes people just suck and there's no redeeming them. This leads him to kinda get the last blow on Jack in the final battle, so to speak, when he burns up the last piece of the map and prevents Jack from getting his wish. And he even gets an epilogue scene with the Bears. Like, they really went above and beyond for a gag character. In fact, now that I'm discussing all the funny Jack and his Cricket buddies give us, time to mention that this is just generally a funny-ass movie. It really isn't fair how this movie, much like Spider-Verse, just has it all. Stellar, game-changing animation, gripping drama, a mature tone compared to its contemporaries, John Mulaney, and really strong humor.
Well, isn't this just fantastic?
Of course, we all know. There's a lot of funny to be had from Puss and Kitty's bickering, the Bears' bubbling attempts at being threatening, that one cameo from the old cat, since that's one of the only memorable gags from the first movie, and Burrito's innocence and and also his swear. Yeah, I think those censor beats took all of us off guard. And the surprising frequency of mild swears like crap, hell, Kitty almost saying bullshit, etc. Director Joel Crawford has stated that these were an intentional way to harken back to the edginess of the Shrek saga. And they're a very welcome addition. So are the hilariously gruesome ways Jack's bakers keep dying. Like, holy shit. Having so many characters perish like this adds some texture to the Dark Forest, while also allowing for some excellent comedic timing with some of these deaths. Hey, wait a minute. Something about all these dead characters reminds me. Am I forgetting to talk about someone in this movie?
Play's over. No
As
touching.
you might have guessed, I've been saving the best part of this movie for last. Let's talk about Death. Undoubtedly my pick for the best villain in any DreamWorks movie.
Someone
I want
needs
to give
assistance.
it right now. Yes, Death is a villain, not a mere antagonist. If he was merely a force of nature who comes to take Puss's last life after he loses it legitimately, then yes, Death would be the antagonist who's merely doing his job. A lot like Terry from Soul. But that's not what's going on here. Death is actively tormenting Puss and attempting to prematurely kill him. One of Puss's past lives even notes that this is cheating. The fact that he changes his mind at the end doesn't change that for most of the movie, he is overstepping the boundaries of his job and doing something legitimately evil. He is a villain. Stop correcting people who say that, because they're right. It's kind of funny though. If you think about it, the story could absolutely function without the character of Death in it. Like, Puss could still be motivated by his fear of death to get the wishing star, and he could still get to this grand adventure for it, with Goldilocks and Jack Horner perfectly serving the film's villain roles. You don't actually need Death the character for this film's story to work. But with that said, holy shit does its presence enhance the film so much. I mentioned in my video on the lack of villains in modern Disney movies, how Disney doesn't really have any more villains because they want to have their protagonists go through and overcome eternal struggles. But DreamWorks went ahead and proved you could do both this character, since death is the physical manifestation of Puss's anxiety and greatest fear. As a result, Puss gets a great arc and compelling struggle in this film, while we also get one of the most badass, intense villains in any
That is one shiny
movie
hat.
in recent memory. Many people have noticed and pointed out that his first appearance is in the crowd during the giant fight, which is badass as all hell. You never knew it, Puss, but he was always
Say cheese!
there, quietly waiting for the chance to take Puss's lives away. And his proper introduction scene is so quietly sinister.
Have fun with this
Yet
gift.
the lights blowing out, the ominous, now iconic missile starting, and the big guy himself seemingly appearing out of nowhere. You can just feel how much this beast is savoring every moment of this first conversation with Puss. All leading up to him.
Oh, you know, I should get to Puss to level 90.
We'll see about
Another
that.
great detail about the scene is how Puss finished 8 glasses of milk, and now he's currently on his 9th. She doesn't finish before he confronts the wolf. That's probably a metaphor for something. Gee, I don't know what it could be, though. During the fight, you get to hear Puss's signature heroic theme as he attempts to fight what he assumes is a simple bounty hunter, even though he consistently can't land a hit on him. This all culminates in the wolf doing just that to him, landing a blow with sight. There's even hyper-realistic blood to really signify that, holy shit, our favorite fearless hero Catboy is in legitimate danger.
Stand clear.
I shouldn't have to tell you how hard this shot goes, or this. The direction and the way this moment is framed heightens the intensity and makes for one killer scene, pun entirely intended. It also harkens back to the opening song, where Puss arrogantly sang about how he's never been touched by a blade before. He really prides himself in this fact. It makes him feel invincible, which is why his moment of death, finally breaking this streak and proving to Puss once and for all that he is indeed mortal, is huge, and is appropriately given all the weight it deserves from a directorial standpoint. It causes Puss's hair to stand on end and turn gray. All as Death talks about how much he enjoys the smell of fear, mocks Puss for having his lives flash before his eyes, and of course, tells Puss to pick up his sword, knowing full well that Puss won't. I also really like how this brief shot of one of Puss's lives is the only appearance of Shrek and Donkey in the whole film. Like, this is the first time since 2010 that a movie has featured Shrek in it. You'd think that would be a celebratory moment, or in other words, a nostalgia bait moment. But they don't play it up at all. It was a big part of one of Puss's lives. It deserves to be shown here, but they're not going to linger on it because it's not what this story is about. I appreciate the restraint, especially considering how the opening logo had Boss Baby in it. So it's nice to know that the movie can use legacy characters appropriately, even if the logo can't. It's also fun how it kinda sorta resembles that shot of Timon, Pumbaa, and Simba walking across the bridge in Lion King, continuing the trend of Disney parallels and riffs. But none of that really matters right now. We're not meant to cheer at the fact that we just saw Shrek and Donkey. We're meant to fear the fact that Puss might not see them again. He runs away. You can just tell that the wolf is relishing every moment of this torture. Puss manages to escape through the toilet. And again, let's just appreciate the restraint that DreamWorks, of all studios, had to not make a joke out of this. They're taking this moment seriously, as they should. From this point on, Death informs nearly every action Puss takes in the film. He scoffed at the notion of giving up adventuring until this monstrosity showed up and absolutely bodied him. Now he's hanging up his hat and boots and resigning himself
Access
to
denied.
retirement until he learns of the last watch and he forms a new plan to achieve death. His entire motivation revolves around Death. The two are intrinsically
No
linked
touching.
to the point where Death doesn't interact
For
with
red
anyone
purpose.
in the whole film outside of the woods. Jack Warner and his entire team of makers literally die, but Death doesn't sweep in to reap their souls or anything. He's only here for this one gotcha, and no one else is even aware of his presence until the final fight, which makes it feel all the more sinister. Like, yeah, no, he isn't just here because this is his job. He is a malicious, relentless hunter, hell-bent on torturing one guy. He also shows up incredibly sporadically, only having about 7 minutes of screen time in the whole film, and yet his shadow looms over all of it. Using him so infrequently makes every encounter distinct and memorable. And then there's the scene in the cave with all of Puss's past lives, where we get a glimpse of his motivation, how he feels slighted by Puss treating his lives so frivolously and not valuing any of them. Plus calling the whole idea of 9 lives absurd. Which, it totally is. Cats are OP, please nerf. We even get his only comedic lines in the film, where he finally reveals himself to be dead, and clarifies that he doesn't mean it metaphorically, or rhetorically, or theoretically, or poetically, and that he's just dead. Straight up. Way to make a genuinely funny line that also manages to fit the tone of a dark character and a dark scene. It just feels so natural, and it doesn't take anything away from the terror of the character. The scene also has delightfully frightening imagery, and now is probably a good time to mention that there are kids watching this. Like, technically,